So it's quite a conundrum that we have to deal with. Debt servicing every year in terms of the payments is around $2.5 billion. But here we are, we want an IMF program. We need that stability. You look at our debt portfolio, 13.1 billion for the Euro bonds, but then with bilateral partners, China alone, about half of that, 1.7 billion. Then you look at the Paris Club, about 1.9 billion. But that isn't really where the problem is. Because if China doesn't come along, it appears we're going to be in dire straits. And like some experts have said, look, in this deal, the debt restructuring would be at China's behest. How they want it to go is how we will be compelled to let it go. It will be on their terms, not on our terms. How does that factor into the fact that we need this IMF program as quickly as possible? What is your reading on the China situation?
Well, thank you very much. I think that we are majoring on the minor.
We are?
Yeah. And my considered view is that this whole global geopolitics with Russia, China, a bit more India on one side, and then the West, particularly Paris Club creditors on the other hand, is playing out in Ghana's debt restructuring. And the reason I'm saying so is that there is some consciousness to make China look like a bad lender on the continent. And I think that is not fair on the part of, or which that view, that picture is not fair to be accommodated.
You're referring to debt diplomacy then. Of course, we've always had it. And it has been said in the past that China is a bit opaque when it comes to its debt dealings and not as transparent as, for example, the G7 would be. We know they don't operate within the G20 framework when it comes to debt restructuring and all of that. Is it unfair then to look at China, especially on the back of things we've seen in Africa, in Sri Lanka, other places being seized and all of that? Is it that unfair to China?
Look, let's look at it from this perspective. That Paris Club creditors, non-Paris Club creditors, they are all on the continent for what they can get.
Agreed.
None of them is here solely for your interest. Now, if you examine the literature, whether it's China, whether it's France, US, UK, whatever, they've all used Africa as a stepping stone in their developmental process. Then China stepped in lately through debt and trade diplomacy. Now, at a time when Africa needed the West most, was actually when the West abandoned Africa.
And China filled the gap.
And then China stepped up to the plate. So China's developmental footprint on the continent in the last 20, 25 years is there for anyone and everyone to see. That is not to suggest that China is in here solely for our good. They are in here for their interests also. Unfortunately, it is only Africa that is in this with no clear strategy of what it wants from the rest of the world. Now, and the reason I'm saying so is that at a time when we needed a lot of developmental assistance, concessionary and the rest of them, the Paris Club creditors were organizing sending off parties for themselves. So if you look at the composition, bilateral, Paris Club creditors, all of them put together relative to China, do you see the balance?
Yes, it's about 200 million because China alone is 1.7 billion and all of them put together 1.9 billion.
So now, okay. So that should tell you that China has more to forgive compared to any other Paris Club creditor.